Welcome to Under Baobab Skies. Beneath the vast night sky above Kumasi, the stars hung like beads on an invisible crown. Each shimmer seemed to pulse with the quiet heartbeat of the Ashanti world that moved not by chance, but by hierarchy, rhythm, and honor. The air was thick with palm oil smoke and the low hum of drums rolling through the courtyards, keeping time with the breathing of the earth. Every sound meant something. Every silence, too. In this kingdom, order was a divine language. From the golden stool to the smallest courtyard, life was measured in gestures of respect. Even the breeze carried etiquette. It bent first before entering a chief's compound. And among all who served this living rhythm, none were more trusted or more feared than the Abrafo, the swift-footed envoys of the royal word. They were the runners of destiny, muscular, alert, their calves shining with dust and sweat. Their job was not simply to deliver messages. They carried the soul of intention, sealed within speech. A king's whisper could cross forests, rivers, and battlefields through their tongues. A single misplaced word could start a war. A moment of silence could end one. The Abrafo lived by a code older than gold. Your tongue is the king's spear draw, it only when commanded. They spoke only when permitted, and learned to bear the weight of secrets heavier than iron. For them, silence was not absence, it was power held in check. The corridors of Kumasi's palace knew their footsteps well. In the deep hours before dawn, they moved like shadows between courtyards, their presence announced only by the soft jingle of brass anklets. But their duty was more than physical. To be an Abrafo was to stand between truth and obedience. They were the bridge between a ruler's will and a people's understanding, a position that demanded both faith and cunning. To misrepresent a message was treason. To hesitate when truth was unwelcome was cowardice. And yet, truth in its rawest form could destroy the very order they were sworn to protect. Let's pause for a moment. The night wind sighs through the baobab leaves, and the fire flickers in thought. Every society has its messengers, but few have understood the spiritual danger of carrying truth as deeply as the Ashanti did. A message, once spoken, left the mouth like a spirit, leaving the body impossible to recall. To speak in the name of the king was to wield divine authority. To lie in his name was to invite cosmic ruin. Thus, the Abrafo were both blessed and cursed, forever living at the edge of sacred speech. One might wonder what happens when the message itself is unjust, when a royal command contradicts the quiet pulse of conscience. In the Ashanti worldview, this was not a question of rebellion, but of spiritual negotiation. Words were alive, and the Abrafo learned the art of bending truth without breaking destiny, a delicate dance between loyalty and wisdom. Sometimes they used proverbs as shields, cloaking dangerous meanings behind metaphor. When the river floods, they might say, "It does not ask permission of the bridge." Such words could soften harsh decrees or prepare a rival chief for inevitable loss. Other times, they relied on silence, strategic, deliberate, holy. Silence could delay a war, calm a temper, or give the ancestors time to intervene. In this world, the rhythm of communication was sacred. Drums spoke before men did. Talking drums sent coded messages that only trained ears could decode. Each beat echoed the syllables of Twi, reshaping language into vibration. In the hands of royal drummers, even a warning could sound like a lullaby. To the untrained ear, it was music. To those who knew, it was instructions, sometimes command, sometimes mercy. From the palace's heart, the Abrafo learned these rhythms not merely as tools of governance, but as languages of survival. They were guardians of resonance, aware that power traveled faster through rhythm than through speech. and in moments when words became dangerous, rhythm became refuge. A certain pattern of drum beats could mean asterisk, wait, asterisk. Another could mean asterisk, not yet, asterisk. A silence between beats could mean asterisk, the king reconsiders, asterisk. So, when oracles later rose to prominence, declaring the destinies of kings and empires, the Abrafo recognized a familiar weight. For what is an oracle, if not another kind of messenger? In the centuries to come, colonial winds would test these sacred orders. Foreign interpreters, priests, and officers came bearing their own languages of command. They, too, sent envoys, but their messages lacked rhythm-only logic and power. The Abrafo watched as words lost their holiness and became tools of bureaucracy. Yet, within them, something of the old discipline survived. The reverence for precision, the caution in speech, the understanding that truth must be carried, not shouted. And in the quiet corners of shrines and forest clearings, the oracles, those ancient interpreters of destiny, listened still. They saw how a messenger's dilemma mirrored their own, the burden of truth. For an oracle's duty was also to speak what was revealed, even when kings trembled to hear it. Thus, the thread of sacred communication stretched unbroken from the runners of Kumasi to the diviners of Ife, from the coded drum to the whispered prophecy. Across kingdoms, the question remained the same. Who can bear truth without being broken by it? As the stars over Kumasi blinked in solemn rhythm, the fires crackled softened. The night felt like a breath held between past and prophecy. Somewhere beyond the city walls, a runner carried a sealed message. Somewhere deeper still, an oracle dreamed of voices waiting to be heard. Both bore the same burden: to serve truth without owning it, to speak without vanity, to listen without fear. That is where our journey begins, tonight, in a world where speech was sacred, where silence could save nations, and where the act of carrying truth was both an honor and a haunting. Thank you for joining me. If you're captivated by these stories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep the fire burning and bring more tales from under the baobab to you. We'll see you next time. You are now under baobab skies, and the story begins now. Ever wondered how ancient kings sent messages across vast, dangerous lands without phones or mail? By the end of this journey, you'll understand how messengers of the Ashanti Empire trained their bodies and spirits to run from dawn to dusk, crossing rivers, mountains, and enemy borders just to deliver the king's words unbroken. It's a story of incredible human endurance. The first lesson a royal messenger learned was not how to speak, it was how to breathe. Imagine this. In the early light of Kumasi's dawn, the forest is still asleep, its leaves heavy with dew. A group of men, the Abrafo, stand barefoot before the palace gates, silent as carved statues. They inhale the scent of red earth, sweat, and palm oil, a mixture of duty and destiny. Their training began not in the mouth, but in the lungs, legs, and heart. Because before you can carry the king's words, you first have to conquer the silence of distance. The forest was their first and greatest teacher. They ran through it until the thorns no longer cut, until the echo of their own breath blended with the rhythm of the trees. It was said that a true Abrafo could run for an entire day without resting, guided only by the drumbeat of duty in their hearts. Every single stride was a prayer, every drop of sweat an offering. They carried no weapons, only a staff marked with royal insignia. This staff was living proof that their words came directly from the golden stool, the sacred symbol of the Ashanti kingdom. This staff was sacred. Losing it meant a dishonor far worse than death. An Abrafo's life depended entirely on trust, not the kind earned through friendship, but the sacred trust of responsibility. The king's word had to arrive unbroken, unmarred by fatigue, temptation, or fear. To be a messenger was to become the message itself. Let's just pause for a moment. Close your eyes and listen. The forest breathes with us. The cicadas hum their ancient rhythm, a soft percussion in the background of this story of endurance. Every kingdom had its warriors, its hunters, its dancers. But the Abrafo were the arteries of the empire, carrying the lifeblood of speech through mountains, rivers, and enemy lands. They were trained in silence because any sound could betray them. They learned to read tracks in the dust, to tell when an animal had passed, or when danger waited in the undergrowth. They memorized each path, not from a map, but through memory and intuition. The sharp bend in a river, the distinct call of a night bird, the smell of an approaching rainstorm. In these signs, they found their direction. When dusk fell, they did not stop. They ran by moonlight, guided by the gleam of fireflies and what they believed were ancestral whispers. In some regions, villagers would leave small bowls of water and roasted yam along the known messenger path, simple offerings to strength and purpose. Because everyone understood, the messenger's endurance protected the peace of the entire realm. But it wasn't only the body that was trained. It was the spirit. Before an Abrafo's very first royal mission, he was taken to a secluded grove outside Kumasi. There, the elders performed a ritual called the Rite of the First Silence. He would kneel, head bowed, as an elder whispered, "You are the king's echo. Speak only when commanded. Listen always." A libation was poured, palm wine for the ancestors, and cool water for endurance. Then, the messenger was anointed with ground charcoal and she oil, marking him as one who would walk the thin line between life and duty. These rituals weren't about courage. Courage alone could not survive hunger, thirst, or the overwhelming temptation to just rest. This was about discipline. Discipline was the hidden spirit of endurance. It was the whisper in your ear when your body was screaming. When his legs ached and the dark forest seemed to close in, the Abrafo remembered that his breath carried the weight of peace or war. Sometimes his mission was a joyous one, the birth of a prince or the announcement of a great victory. Other times it was grim, a declaration of war, a command for execution, the recall of an exiled chief. The forest didn't care which message he carried, only that he kept moving. On certain journeys, the land itself was the adversary. The Abrafo crossed swollen rivers, scaled mountains slick with moss, and braved sudden storms that turned roads into red sludge. Yet every hardship had its meaning. Crossing a river reminded him of transition from one truth to another. Climbing a hill reminded him of vision, that the higher you rise, the smaller the noise of the crowd becomes. The forest tested not only his endurance, but also his integrity. At times, rival kingdoms would offer gold, food, or even companionship to delay or corrupt the messenger's purpose. But to accept any gift while on duty was taboo. The Abrafo belonged to no one except the king, and to no spirit except the one guarding the royal stool. Those who broke this sacred vow were said to lose their shadow, a way of saying they no longer walked with the ancestors. Protection. Among the messengers, the story of one Abrafo, Kwaku Panyun, was often told around fires as a warning. He had accepted a pouch of cowrie shells from a border chief, thinking it was a harmless gift. But when he returned home, he found his wife had died in childbirth that very same night. The elders said the gift carried a curse not of malice, but of imbalance. And so, the messengers learned a hard lesson. When you carry the king's word, your life is not your own. When they finally reached their destination, The Abrafo did not bow before the local chief immediately. Instead, they waited, silent, composed, as the royal linguist was summoned. Only after formal greetings would they raise the sacred staff, unroll the message, if there was one, and recite its contents. Every syllable had to be pronounced with absolute exactness, every proverb delivered with its intended weight. They didn't speak like ordinary men. Their tone carried a special rhythm, echoing the palace linguists who had trained them. To listen to an Abrafo was to hear the court's authority, made flesh-disciplined, measured, and unyielding. And when the message was delivered, they took no food until they began the return journey. To eat before running home was considered to dilute the spirit of their mission. That first taste of yam, upon returning to Kumasi, symbolized the completion of truth. By the time night settled again, the Abrafo was once more alone on the forest path, retracing his steps by moonlight. His body was weary, but his spirit remained sharp. In that profound silence, he was both man and messenger, living reminder that truth must travel, no matter the terrain. Somewhere behind him, the city of Kumasi pulsed like a living drum, and ahead, the stars stretched over the savannah, whispering of tomorrow's missions, tomorrow's distances, and tomorrow's words that were waiting to be carried. And so, the forest, the messenger, and the word, all three, became one eternal rhythm, motion in service of meaning. Did you know there was a time when a message could start a war or save a kingdom, not with words, but with the beat of a drum? Let's travel back to the heart of the mighty Ashanti Empire, where words were not just sounds, they were spirits given form. To speak the king's message aloud was to awaken something invisible and powerful. This is the story of the Abrafo, the royal messengers, who were not only the fastest runners, but also the keepers of a secret language of power. Every Ashanti court had its own complex system of symbols, proverbs, and drum codes. It was a way to speak so that only the initiated could hear the true meaning. To outsiders, it was beautiful poetry or rhythmic music, but to those within the palace walls, it was law. And so, after learning to run until their feet were as tough as leather, a new messenger had to learn something even more crucial: how to listen. Imagine a young apprentice spending months within the grand Ashanti palace, just listening. The air is thick with the sound of talking drums echoing across the courtyards. Each rhythm carries a sentence, a command, a secret. Asterisk, Ga me, na me, Ga wo, asterisk, leave me, and I will leave you. Asterisk, Ohani daho, asterisk, the king is present. Asterisk, enterisk, nsuo, rebo, asterisk, rain is falling. To an untrained ear, it's just music, a beautiful, complex melody. But to the Abrafo, it was a living code, where the subtle difference between two beats could mean peace or war. Let's just pause here for a moment. Picture yourself sitting under the wide, cool veranda of the Manhaya Palace in Kumasi. You can hear the drums speaking across the capital city. The notes seem to bounce off the intricately carved pillars and the gold-gleaming thrones. Somewhere in the distance, an elder listens, interpreting the rhythm with a knowing nod. A message is traveling, completely unseen, carried only on sound waves. This was the world of the Abrafo. They learned to translate this invisible rhythm into motion. When the king's linguist, the asterisk Okayim asterisk, drummed an instruction, the messenger didn't just hear it, he felt it resonate deep in his chest. Each tone had a weight, a density, like a heartbeat carrying the destiny of thousands. During their intense training, elders taught them to mimic the drummers themselves. At first, they stumbled, they made mistakes. They might confuse a call of warning with a call of blessing, a dangerous error. But day by day, their ears sharpened. They learned to count the pauses between the beats, to sense the hidden emotion, the anger, the urgency, the sorrow that was hidden between the thundering notes. For example, when the drum pattern for *Biko Reba *War is coming was played faster than usual, it wasn't just a warning. It meant extreme urgency, the kind that demanded immediate departure, no questions asked. This subtle awareness, this deep listening, could literally save the kingdom. But the drum was just one layer of their secret communication. The second layer was speech without words. The Abrafo were trained masters of proverbs and gestures, each one layered with hidden meanings. They spoke in what scholars later called the language of the stool, phrases that concealed direct commands and intentions beneath a veil of respectful imagery. For instance, a messenger would never say, "The king is angry." Instead, he might arrive and solemnly declare, "The leopard is restless." If a difficult negotiation needed to be postponed, the message would be, "The yam is not yet ripe for the harvest." And if someone had fallen out of favor with the king, the devastating news would be delivered with the phrase, "The stool has turned its face away." This was both a form of protection and a performance. It allowed messengers to navigate dangerous truths, to tell a powerful chief that his loyalty was being questioned without uttering a single word that could be deemed offensive. In the Ashanti world, silence was never emptiness. It was a strategy. What was left unsaid often carried far more power than what was spoken. A truly great messenger was not only swift of foot, but also measured of tongue. The elders had a saying, "The mouth that carries the king's word must be as clean as the calabash used for libation." A single careless phrase could spill blood. In particularly tense moments, the Abrafo would often use drum rhythms played on a smaller, portable drum, or even tap out a rhythm with their staff. Instead of speaking when first approaching foreign envoys or rival chiefs, this prevented any misinterpretation and shielded the sacred core of the message until the official linguist, the Okaim, arrived to translate it fully. Even amongst themselves, these messengers had a silent language, a specific pattern of footsteps as they approached a meeting point, a bird call whistled in the dead of night, or the way a cloth was wrapped around an armhole of it meant something. To outsiders, these might look like superstitions or random habits. To the Abrafo, it was their security system, a way of ensuring they were meeting an ally and not an enemy. This intricate world of communication also carried a deep spiritual weight. Before every major mission, the chief linguist would perform a ritual and recite an invocation over the messenger. Let the tongue not stumble. Let the words reach where the feet travel. It was both a blessing and a solemn reminder that the truth of the message must not break or change during its journey. The Abrafo internalized this creed so deeply that even when they were hundreds of miles from the capital, they spoke as if the king himself were standing right beside them. They never paraphrased. They never added their own flair or embellishments. Their professional pride was rooted in absolute accuracy, not in creative storytelling. At times, they were called upon to deliver messages so sensitive that even their facial expression was part of the code. A frown could be instructed to convey sorrow. A steady, unbroken gaze might mean the king's decision was final and not open for debate. In this way, their entire bodies became instruments of meaning as deliberate and precise as the talking drum, and as subtle as the wind rustling through the tall elephant grass. Let's pause again. Imagine it's late at night. A fire flickers low, casting dancing shadows. The air hums with the secrets of the forest. Now, imagine carrying another person's voice in your mouth, his authority in your posture, yet not being allowed to alter a single word or gesture. Imagine living in a world where language itself was sacred ground, where a single misstep could unravel everything. Because the Abrafo walked among kings, priests, and fierce warriors, they learned a hard lesson very quickly. Speech could build empires, but it could also break them. A single mistranslated phrase between two rival chiefs could ignite a war that would last for generations. A softened warning delivered to a general could cost him his army and his life. A delayed command could mean the loss of a city. And so, the messengers built an inner wall of fortitude and emotional distance, wrapped in unshakable composure. They became neutral vessels, bound by the strict etiquette of the court, but hardened by the realities they witnessed on the road. There's a story of one messenger, Abrafo Mensa, who traveled for 6 grueling days to deliver a royal pardon to a condemned general. When he finally arrived, exhausted but triumphant, he learned he was too late. The man had already been executed. The chief of that town had misunderstood a prior message, misreading the rhythm on the drums. From that tragedy, a proverb was born that is still whispered in Ashanti towns today. When the drum speaks twice, listen with both ears. It became a powerful reminder. Never assume, never rush, and never, ever interrupt the rhythm of truth. In time, the Abrafo came to embody the central paradox of royal communication. They maintained absolute silence and secrecy on the road, only to deliver their message with perfect eloquence at their destination. Their mastery of code, language, and restraint earned them immense respect across all Akan lands. Even foreign traders from distant shores learned to step aside respectfully when they saw the insignia of the golden stool, the asterisk, Sika Diwe Kofi asterisk, carved into a messenger's staff. But among themselves, they were bound by a powerful sense of humility. No messenger could ever boast of the state secrets he carried or the important missions he undertook. The Ashanti called this quiet strength asterisk a hobrisi asteriska noble humility. It was the mark of someone who serves a great cause without seeking personal recognition. The king might reward them with gold dust or fine kente cloth, but their true honor was unseen. It was the private knowledge that peace had been kept or that prosperity had been secured, all because of their unwavering discretion. To the Abrafo, the finest message was the one delivered without altering a single breath of the king's original intent. And so, in a world of silence and symbols, of drumbeats and proverbs, they preserved the empire's most delicate balance, the fragile line between what is known and what must remain unspoken. The drums are quiet now. The messenger's staff glints under the silent moon. But somewhere, deep within the palace, the linguist begins to tap out another coded rhythm, calling him to duty once more. The message must travel. There's a specific kind of ache, a loneliness that is understood only by those who stand between their people and the vast, unknowable horizon. It's a loneliness that isn't about being physically alone, but about carrying the collective voices of an entire community while having no one, truly, to confide in. This was the world of the Griot. The Griot, after all, was a vessel. They were meticulously filled with the triumphs and the tears of others, of powerful kings, humble farmers, loving mothers, and valiant soldiers. Their minds and hearts were storehouses of epics, genealogies, and cautionary tales. Yet, for all the stories they absorbed, they were rarely allowed to pour out their own. Their personal sorrows, their private joys, their own untold stories, often remained unspoken, sealed within. Night after night, in the flickering torchlight of royal courts or the communal warmth of village squares, they recited histories. Their words were a loom, weaving threads of memory into the permanent fabric of their culture. The past was not a dusty, forgotten thing. It was alive, breathing, and present in the Griot's voice. But when the final note of the kora faded and the rhythmic pulse of the drums quieted, they would sit under the very same stars as everyone else. In that profound silence, they felt the immense distance between the grand stories they told and the quiet emptiness that followed. It was in these moments of stillness that a griot learned a fundamental truth. Duty was not simply a performance, it was a sacrifice. Let's pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Imagine the scene. The fire crackles softly beside you, its embers glowing like fallen stars. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the ghost of a balafon carried on the wind, its wooden notes whispering of promises kept and promises tragically broken. This is the atmosphere where the griot's soul resides. Many griots were bound to specific families by sacred oaths, passed down through generations like a royal heirloom from father to son, from mother to daughter. This loyalty was both their greatest gift and their heaviest shackle. If the family they served rose to power and glory, the griot rose with them, their name sung in the same breath. But if that family felleth, betrayal, war, or exile struck them down, the griot's fate was inextricably tied to theirs. They followed their patrons into obscurity, or worse. Some were forced to become wanderers, carrying the stories of broken kingdoms on weary feet, their only possession the history of a people who no longer had a home. Imagine one such griot, a man whose master's entire lineage has just ended in blood and betrayal. He walks alone now, through a vast savanna just after dusk. The air is thick, heavy with the scent of dust and the relentless, hypnotic hum of cicadas. He carries a single, coiled kora string in his leather pouch, the last, tangible relic of his sacred duty. He begins to hum softly to himself, a melody with no audience, a song without a listener. This tune doesn't praise a long-dead king or recount a glorious battle. It's simpler, more profound. It's a song that mourns the vast, lonely distance between his calling and his freedom. This duty wasn't just about speaking. It was about remembering. And remembrance, true remembrance, is its own kind of weight. When griots spoke of heroes, they also had to bear witness to their flaws, their moments of weakness, their human failings. When they sang of great victories, they also held in their memory the silent screams of the fallen, the cost of that triumph written in blood and tears. To keep history honest was a painful, often dangerous task. For the unvarnished truth has a way of offending the living, even as it honors the dead. It takes courage to speak of a king's foolishness to his proud descendants. So, many griots learned to speak in riddles, in proverbs, in metaphors. They wrapped the sharp edges of the truth in layers of poetry like a precious, secret blade folded in soft cloth. This was a survival tactic. It allowed wisdom to travel safely past dangerous, unreceptive ears. The powerful might hear a pleasant story, while the wise would understand the deeper warning. And yet, these very same riddles left the griot further isolated. Who could truly understand the speaker who always hid their deepest thoughts behind a veil of poetry? Who could know the person behind the persona? This profound commitment often meant a personal life deferred. There were griots who married late in life, or not at all. It wasn't because they lacked desire or the capacity for love, but because their lives were never truly their own. They belonged to something larger, to words, to memory, to time itself. Their most profound intimacy was not with another person, but with the past. They were custodians of centuries, and that is a demanding, all-consuming partner. And this is the beautiful paradox, within that immense burden, there was an undeniable beauty. For in serving memory, griots gave their people something far greater than themselves. Continuity. They were the living thread connecting the past to the present, ensuring the future would have roots. Even as they stood apart, their role was to bind communities together, to make sure no name was ever lost to the silence of time, no lesson forgotten. They transformed a heavy duty into a sacred devotion, and they turned their profound distance into a source of unwavering discipline. Let's pause once more. Imagine the sky has deepened to an inky, velvet black, studded with 1,000,000 brilliant stars. The air has cooled, and you can almost smell the comforting scent of wood smoke and sai butter drifting from the nearby village huts. The griot, sitting by the fire, lifts his voice again. It's quieter this time, more intimate. He isn't performing for an audience now. He's singing for the ancestors, the ones who he knows have never stopped listening. Tomorrow he will rise before the dawn. He will drink cool water, say his prayers, and prepare to tell the same truths all over again. He will recount the lineage of the chiefs, the founding of the village, the story of the great drought. Because history, to a griot, is not a story you finish and put on a shelf. It is a heartbeat. And his sacred duty, his life's purpose, is to make sure it never stops beating. War is often remembered for its generals, its drums, and its victories. But in the shadows between commands and chaos walked a quieter figure, the messenger. Among the Ashanti, he was called Abrafo, the bearer of words that could end bloodshed or ignite it. He was not always a soldier, yet every soldier's life depended on him. He did not swing a blade, yet his tongue carried the weight of iron. When the call to arms echoed across the forest paths of Kumasi, the Abrafo mounted his horse, not with the arrogance of a warrior, but with the solemn knowledge that his life was a letter sealed by the king himself. Let's pause for a breath. Imagine the fire murmuring beside you. The night air smells of iron and palm wine. Somewhere beyond the hills, a drum line rolls low and steady, like the heartbeat of a nation preparing to defend its pride. This is the world of the Abrafo. His duty began long before the first spear was lifted. He memorized the king's decree, word for word, as no parchment could be trusted in enemy lands. His tongue became a vault, his mind the fortress. When he rode out with the army, he was the living thread between the golden stool and the dust of the battlefield, the vital link between order and chaos, life and death. It is said that before every departure, an Abrafo would touch his forehead to the earth 3 times before the palace gates, whispering, "May truth ride with me." Then he would rise, mount his horse, and vanish into the morning mist, a silent guardian of the king's will. In the deafening clash of regiments, when horns blared and dust rose thick enough to choke the sun, the Abrafo moved like a ghost. He rode beside the generals, his face a mask of calm, even as arrows hissed past his ears. His task was not to fight, it was to listen, to carry, to deliver. There were times he bore surrender terms wrapped in white cloth, approaching the enemy lines with one hand raised high, his other gripping the king's sacred seal. If he returned safely, the warriors would feast and praise his bravery. If he did not, his name would be sung softly that night, not in mourning, but in honor. For he had died preserving order amid the madness of war. To bear words through battle required a strange kind of courage, not the explosive kind that charges forward, but the enduring kind that holds its ground. The Abrafo could not shout, could not tremble, could not show a flicker of doubt. Every pause, every breath was measured against the precarious rhythm of survival. His composure was his shield, his memory his weapon. He understood that a single misplaced word or a moment of hesitation could unravel an entire military campaign. He was the embodiment of focus in a world spinning out of control. But there were also times when the messenger carried darker tidings, the declaration of war. Such words were never spoken lightly. Before sunrise, the elders and captains would gather under the sacred odum tree. The king's voice would thunder across the court, blessing his warriors and entrusting his will to the Abrafo. Once spoken, those words became fate. The Abrafo's mission became irreversible. He would leave the golden city of Kumasi, carrying not weapons, but words. And yet, those words would strike harder and travel farther than any sword. He would arrive before the opposing chief's compound, escorted by 2 drummers. Their rhythm was deliberate, slow, steady, grave. It announced an occasion of the utmost importance. When the drums finally ceased, the Abrafo would plant his ceremonial staff into the earth and announce, "The Asanahin speaks. His patience ends here." The moment those words touched the air, the world tilted irrevocably toward battle. The message was delivered, and the messenger's duty for that moment was done. He had delivered destiny. Even bitter enemies understood the sanctity of the messenger. To harm an Abrafo was a profound taboo, an act that was believed to curse the ancestors themselves. There are stories of warriors lowering their weapons as a messenger approached, their faces tight with hatred, yet their spirits bound by an ancient code of respect. Because to kill the king's voice was to silence the very gods that watched over both camps. It was an invitation for cosmic chaos. One ancient song from the Ashanti forest region still tells of a battle that never was all, because the Abrafo spoke first. He arrived between 2 armies poised for slaughter, and told of a famine that gripped both of their kingdoms, of mothers who had buried too many sons. He spoke not of war, but of shared suffering. And so the chiefs laid down their spears. Instead of war, they traded yam and salt. The Abrafo returned home to no thunderous applause, only the quiet, knowing nods from elders who understood that peace is often the hardest and most courageous victory to win. But not all tales ended so kindly. History is not always a song of peace. Sometimes messages failed to arrive. Horses fell, rivers flooded, ambushes struck from the dense forest shadows. In those moments of silence, confusion would spread like wildfire through a waiting army. A regiment waiting for orders to advance or retreat would act on fear instead of wisdom. Without the messenger's word, strategy dissolved into panic, and entire kingdoms could collapse before a single word of command was ever spoken. Thus, the Abrafo became more than just a courier. He became a powerful symbol of reliability and trust. When people spoke of loyalty, they would say, "Be as steady as the king's messenger." For he was not merely trusted, his role was sacred, woven into the very fabric of the empire's stability. His presence was proof that the kingdom was still whole, that the king's authority reached even the most distant and dangerous corners of the land. The life of a messenger was a masterclass in balance. He had to move with incredible speed but appear unshakably calm. He had to know the deepest secrets of the state but show no hint of pride or arrogance. He carried not only messages but the army's morale on his shoulders, the quiet assurance that the king's hand still reached across miles of perilous jungle to guide and protect them. Some say that when an Abrafo rode into a war camp at dusk, weary soldiers would stop sharpening their blades, lift their heads, and a ripple of relief would pass through the ranks. His arrival meant the kingdom still breathed. It meant they were not alone. Let's pause here again for a moment. The fire flickers lower now. The night deepens around us. In the distance, you can almost hear the faint sound of hooves and the lonely cry of a horn carried on the wind. That sound, that steady, rhythmic heartbeat of connection is what kept an entire empire alive. It was the sound of order pushing back against chaos. The Abrafo dismounts, bows low before the general, and whispers the king's words. and in that single, quiet whisper lies the fate of a nation. No crown ever gleamed for him, no drum roll ever announced his name in the court of heroes. Yet, without his voice, the golden stool, the very soul of the Ashanti nation, might have sat empty, its power scattered like ashes in the wind. He was the pulse of order amid chaos, the living bridge between command and courage, and when dawn broke over the horizon, he was already gone, a lone figure riding again into the distance, the king's words sealed safely in his breath. When the messenger arrived at the royal palace, the battlefield behind him and the forest path still echoing under hooves, a new challenge awaited: the court itself. The Ashanti palace was not merely stone and wood. It was a living order, a choreography of respect, ritual, and hierarchy. Every bow, every gesture, every silence held meaning, and a misstep could unravel trust built over decades. He did not enter as just a man, but as a vessel of the king's will. His hands were empty, yet they carried the weight of authority. His eyes had to be alert but humble, taking in the intricate symbols of rank all around him. The vibrant colors of Kente cloth, the gleaming ornaments of chiefs, and even the subtle position of feet in the grand hall. To navigate this world was to speak a language without words. Let's pause a moment here. Imagine the scene. The torches crackle softly, casting long, dancing shadows along the carved pillars. The air is thick with the scent of incense, drifting like river mist, mingling with the comforting aroma of roasted yam and palm oil. This isn't just a room, it's a sacred space, a living ritual. To enter the court was to step into this ceremony. An Abrafo, one of the king's elite messengers, would pause at the threshold. He would touch the earth lightly with the fingertips of his right hand, whispering a silent prayer for guidance. This small act connected him to the ancestors and grounded him in his purpose. Only then would he bow low before the assembled elders, his forehead brushing the cool, polished floor, a clear signal of his humility and readiness to serve. Every member of the council watched him intently. The chief of palace protocol, a man whose entire life was dedicated to upholding tradition, measured the messenger's posture, noting the alignment of his shoulders and the steadiness of his gaze. You see, a messenger's word might carry the king's command, but the manner in which it was delivered spoke louder than any decree. It was a testament to the discipline and integrity of the throne itself. Movement was a language in the Ashanti court. Every step through the hall was deliberate and measured. A messenger's feet would never cross unless he was given permission. His hands would rest in a specific way, his gestures mirroring the silent language of precedence and rank. The Abrafo trained for years to move with both grace and a kind of invisibility, to appear as if he belonged in this esteemed company, yet never draw undue attention to himself. He understood the very rhythm of the palacer, slow, deliberate cadence of whispers, the soft shuffling of footfalls, and the distant, heartbeat-like pulse of ceremonial drumming. One misaligned gesture, a step taken too soon, could confuse a chief or offend a powerful courtier. It could introduce a seed of doubt where the king demanded absolute certainty. In this world, precision was everything. But the messenger's knowledge of protocol was also a deep knowledge of people. He was a student of human nature. He knew which elder preferred the left-hand greeting as a sign of unique respect, which general expected the slightest, almost imperceptible bow, and which advisor waited silently until the king's words were repeated exactly 3 times. By mastering these intricate social subtleties, he wasn't just being polite. He was reinforcing the authority of the golden stool, ensuring that the king's will flowed unbroken into the very fabric of the empire. Before he even dared to speak, The messenger would perform a series of small, almost invisible rituals. A quick, reverent touch to the ground, a silent invocation to the ancestors who had walked these halls before him, a slow, steadying breath to center his mind. These weren't superstitions. They were acts of profound discipline. They were reminders to himself and to all who watched that his words carried a weight heavier than iron, capable of shaping the destiny of thousands. When the Abrafo finally spoke, it wasn't a rush of sound, but a measured, rhythmic cadence. He recited the king's words exactly as they were given to him, with deliberate pauses that allowed their gravity to settle in the silent hall. The courtiers listened, their bodies leaning forward, their expressions shifting with the rhythm of the truth being unveiled. Every word had consequences. A message about taxation might calm one chief while provoking another. A notice of military conscription could send a ripple of anxiety through a hall filled with the nation's finest warriors. The messenger's true skill was in presenting these potent words in a manner that honored the king, respected the listeners, and maintained the unshakable dignity of the throne. Beyond the visible gestures and the spoken words, the Abrafo understood the invisible network of signals that permeated the palace. He could read the subtle codes that flew silently across the room. A single raised eyebrow from a queen mother could be a pointed inquiry. A faint step forward from a guard, a quiet warning. A paused breath from an elder, a cue to proceed with caution. To outsiders, the whole might have seemed still and silent, but to the trained messenger, it sang like a living orchestra, each motion a verse in the grand song of governance. Young messengers learned this complex rhythm over many years. They would spend countless hours observing quietly from the corners of the hall, practicing their bows and movements endlessly, and correcting themselves long before they were ever allowed to approach the king's presence. Mistakes were incredibly rare because the cost was unthinkably high. One single misstep in etiquette could delay a crucial alliance, strain a marriage between royal families, or, worst of all, misrepresent the king's judgment to his people. The court, with all its splendor and ceremony, might seem like a golden cage to an outsider. But for the Abrafo, it was the stage where his true mastery was revealed. He wielded a unique and silent power, ensuring that the king's word was not just delivered, but received with precision, clarity, and reverence. In this delicate balance of authority and humility, the messenger became indispensable. He was at once invisible yet vital, humble yet commanding, a mortal man entrusted with a divine responsibility. Even when the palace was still, when the golden stools gleamed under the soft lantern light and the last ceremonial drumbeat had faded into the night, the Abrafo remained vigilant. His mind was always at work, his eyes scanning the room, his mind mapping the shifting alliances and political currents. His spirit carried the weight of every unsaid word that might sway the balance between life and death. Every ritual bow, every silent pause, and every careful step he took was a deliberate act to ensure that the king's message remained pure and untarnished. And so, the Abrafo moved through the palace not just as a carrier of news, but as a guardian of truth, a keeper of order, and a quiet, unsung architect of the empire's daily life. The Abrafo was never just one man running through the forest. He was a single, vital link in a living chain network of loyalty, discipline, and ritual that pulsed with the very life of the Ashanti Empire. Every word he carried was part of this invisible yet unbreakable connection, linking the king to his generals, his chiefs, and even the common folk. A single misstep, a forgotten word, could send ripples of chaos through the empire, unraveling carefully laid plans, sowing the seeds of confusion, or even igniting a devastating conflict. This chain of command began in the hallowed halls of the palace. There, the king's decree was spoken in measured, deliberate tones. To ensure absolute clarity, it was often repeated 3 times. The first messenger in the chain was tasked with memorizing not just the words themselves, but the very intention behind them, the subtle emphasis, the sacred rhythm of the king's voice. He would then carry this message, this piece of the king's will, across the bustling courtyards, through the vibrant chaos of the markets, and into the quiet, watchful forests where hunters and scouts awaited the next command. Let's just pause here for a moment. Imagine the scene. The evening wind rustles through the palm fronds overhead. The soft, flickering light of lanterns dances on the hardened faces of the messengers. And in the distance, the faint, rhythmic drumming from a funeral in a neighboring village serves as a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the immense weight of the duty they carry. This network was built on a foundation of absolute trust. As messages passed from one runner to another, from a scout on the frontier to a general on the battlefield, trust became their lifeblood. Each Abrafo understood that his strength was not his alone. It was tied to the strength of his fellow runners and the wisdom of the elders who guided their path. Whether it was a written letter or a verbal report, the message was repeated with meticulous care, with a rhythm and clarity that echoed a sacred chant. Every step in this process was designed to ensure unwavering fidelity to the king's original intention. Mistakes were incredibly rare, but when they occurred, they served as powerful lessons. A misheard phrase, a forgotten gesture, these small errors could create immense tension between provinces. Worse, they could signal falsehood or betrayal to a crucial ally. And so, the Abrafo trained relentlessly. They trained not only their bodies for the punishing runs, but also their minds. They honed their memory, sharpened their hearing, and conditioned their hearts to remain faithful, both in the silence of the journey and in the delivery of the word. The discipline of the Abrafo extended far beyond just accurate repetition. Faithfulness was as much about what was left unsaid as what was spoken. These men were entrusted with secrets heavier than gold. They carried rumors that could shift political tides, warnings that could save entire villages, and strategic commands that could determine the fate of a war. To speak outside the designated chain of command, to let slip a single detail, could unravel months of meticulous planning. The Abrafo spoke only when it was absolutely necessary, and always in the prescribed rhythm, respecting the sacred hierarchy of command. Even during moments of rest, their minds remained vigilant. As their bodies recovered by the warmth of a fire, they would quietly rehearse the codes, the drum sequences, the specific gestures associated with their mission. To falter, to forget, was to betray not just the king, but the delicate, intricate balance of the entire Ashanti state. This wasn't just a job. It was a sacred calling that demanded total dedication. To fortify this incredible discipline, ritual played a central role. Before embarking on a mission, a messenger would perform small, personal rituals of allegiance. He might offer a libation to the golden stool, the very soul of the Ashanti nation. He might touch the sacred symbols etched onto palm boards, or whisper a quiet prayer for safe passage and, most importantly, for an accurate delivery. This beautiful blending of the spiritual and the practical transformed the chain of command. It reinforced the idea that faithfulness was a profound moral and sacred duty, not merely a task to be completed. This network was revered throughout the empire. In the heat of battle, generals depended on these messengers for the orders that could turn the tide of war. In the villages, chiefs anxiously awaited the guidance that could preserve peace or prepare them for conflict. And at the center of it all, the king relied on the silent, unwavering faithfulness of the Abrafo to extend his will far beyond the palace walls, reaching every corner of his domain. The strength of this invisible network was, in many ways, the true strength of the empire. Let's pause again. The sun is now dipping behind the distant hills. Long shadows stretch across the forest path. A whispering wind carries what feels like the echo of a king's decree. A message still alive, still traveling through the forest. The Abrafo's chain of command was unseen but omnipresent. It moved with the fluidity of a river, adapting to any obstacle, flowing round enemies, and stretching across dense forests and wide rivers to deliver the king's words perfectly intact. Empires, we often think, are built on the strength of armies and the gleam of gold. But the Ashanti Empire endured because of these messengers, these silent guardians of communication, these keepers of loyalty. Even as time passed and the borders of the empire shifted, the core principle remained unshakable. A faithful messenger was a living chain, a direct link between the past and the present, the king and his subjects, the spoken word and the world it shaped. The life of an Abrafo, though often invisible to history, was inseparable from the integrity and survival of the empire itself. He carried so much more than words. He carried the trust, the faith, and the continuity of Ashanti power. This chain of command wasn't just a hierarchy of runners. It was a sacred thread connecting human will to divine guidance. It was a thread strengthened by ritual, hardened by discipline, and woven with unwavering loyalty. And through every valley, across every river, and into every village, this incredible thread remained unbroken. In the heart of the Ashanti kingdom, in the royal capital of Kumasi, stood something far more precious than any earthly treasure. It wasn't just an object of wood and gold. It was the Sikadwa Kofi, the golden stool, believed to have descended from the heavens itself. This stool was not a throne for a king to sit upon, but the very soul of the Ashanti people, a sacred vessel holding the spirits of their ancestors, the wisdom of their kings, and the collective spirit of a nation forged in unity. Before any messenger, known as an Abrafo, embarked on a mission from Kumasi, he would approach the golden stool with the deepest reverence. In the grand royal courtyard, thick with the weight of history and expectation, he would stand with hands open and bare, bowing low. This gesture was a profound acknowledgement of the sacred duty he was about to undertake. Libations of palm wine were poured into brass bowls, a sacred offering to invoke the blessings of the ancestors, their spiritual guardians. The Abrafo would whisper oaths of purity, fidelity, and discretion, promising to carry the king's message with unwavering loyalty. Every drumbeat that echoed through the courtyard was like the pulse of the kingdom, a constant reminder to the messenger that he did not walk alone. He carried with him generations of wisdom, ritual, and the sovereignty of the entire Ashanti nation. Imagine this scene for a moment. The sun rises, casting its golden rays behind the grand palace. Dust motes dance in the light, swirling across the polished steps. In the calm before the Abrafo's departure, the only sounds are the soft cooing of doves and the distant, rhythmic hum of the city waking. This quiet moment is filled with an almost palpable sense of anticipation. The Abrafo's duty was far more than delivering mere orders. He was the living conduit of the Golden Stool's authority, the very spirit of unity made flesh. Each message, every instruction, and each ceremonial phrase he was tasked to repeat was a direct extension of the Stool's sacred power. To falter in his duty, to misinterpret a word, or to speak out of turn was not just a political blunder. It was a sacrilege. It was a breach of a sacred trust that could wound the very heart of the Ashanti people, disrupting the harmony between the living, the ancestors, and the divine. Because the stakes were so high, the preparation for this role was meticulous and deeply spiritual. Messengers would prepare their bodies and souls for the journey ahead. They fasted lightly, purifying their physical forms. They bathed in sacred rivers, washing away any impurities that might cling to them. They adorned themselves in cloths dyed with symbolic ochre, where each color and pattern served as a constant reminder of the immense spiritual and political responsibility they shouldered. This was not just a job. It was a sacred calling, a role that demanded absolute physical, mental, and spiritual discipline. The Abrafo was, in essence, a living testament to the values the Ashanti held most dear. Before he took his first step out of Kumasi, the messenger performed a final, crucial ritual known as the entoso. He would walk around the golden stool 3 times, a sacred number in Ashanti cosmology. As he circled, he whispered prayers for the kingdom's well-being and prosperity. Reinforcing the protective aura of the stool, he would then press his fingertips to his heart and gently touch the sacred emblem, forging a direct personal link between himself and the soul of his nation. While he performed this ritual, the elders of the court would chant blessings in soft, measured tones. Their voices, filled with ancient wisdom, were a spiritual shield, sending the Abrafo forward with both the kingdom's authority and the ancestors' divine protection. He wasn't just sent on a mission, he was consecrated for it. To aid him on his journey, he was often given a small pouch containing ceremonial herbs for protection and clarity, a flask of consecrated water, and a carved token, a tangible piece of Kumasi that he could hold, a constant reminder of the continuity of the Ashanti realm and the source of his mandate. The departure itself was quiet and profound. There was no fanfare, no loud proclamations. None were needed. The solemnity of the occasion, the sheer weight of responsibility, the ritual acknowledgement, and the messenger's rhythmic, determined steps told a powerful story of loyalty, courage, and unwavering faith. The silence spoke louder than any trumpet blast ever could. The messenger's journey was not measured simply in miles, but in the transmission of spirit. As he traversed the dense forests, crossed wide rivers, and passed through scattered villages, he became the embodiment of the Golden Stool's authority. Every handshake, every nod of his head, every whispered greeting was an extension of the king's will. He didn't need to announce his arrival with grand speeches. Local chiefs, allies, and even soldiers recognized the bearer of the king's word, not just by his official attire, but by his very presence. The aura of ritual preparation and sacred duty traveled with him like a shroud of authority. His demeanor, his focus, his discipline all signaled that he was on a mission of the highest importance. Every step he took on the path reinforced the unity of the Ashanti Empire. His journey was a living, breathing map of the kingdom's influence. Even as rival kingdoms and potential adversaries watched the Abrafo moving swiftly through the forests or along vital trade routes, they understood something profound. They saw that the Golden Stool was not just a seat of political power in a distant capital. It was an active, binding symbol of cohesion, ancestry, and sacred trust that connected every corner of the empire. The messenger's journey made the invisible power of Kumasi visible and tangible, a constant presence throughout the land. The Abrafo's heart beat in rhythm with the pulse of the kingdom. The long, arduous runs were not merely tests of physical endurance. They were ceremonial acts in themselves. They were prayers in motion, a way of honoring the ancestors with every stride and affirming the strength and continuity of the Ashanti state. In this sacred duty, silence was as important as speech. The messenger's quietude on the trail was a reflection of his discipline, his unwavering loyalty, and his deep comprehension of the divine mandate entrusted to him. He was a keeper of secrets, a bearer of truths that could shape the destiny of the nation. Let's pause again here. Picture the messenger, his body lean and strong from countless journeys, crossing a river at dawn. The water sparkles in the early light, a cool balm on his tired feet. The rustle of leaves in the canopy above sounds like whispers from the forest spirits. This moment, surrounded by nature, is a powerful reminder of the delicate balance he must maintain, the balance between the natural world, his earthly duty, and his sacred, spiritual responsibility. Through these forests, over rolling hills, and across deep valleys, the Abrafo carried the spirit of the stool, ensuring that wherever he traveled, the unity and moral authority of Kumasi reached every corner of the empire. The messenger's role as the living embodiment of the golden stool was a truth that was never fully visible to the common eye. It was a subtle, yet immensely powerful aspect of the Ashanti political and spiritual system. His job was not simply about delivery. It was about preservation, veneration, and the enactment of unity in every single action he took. With each passing step, with every mile covered, the Abrafo made the invisible bonds of the empire visible. He connected people to their leaders, the living to their ancestors, and the physical world to the spiritual realm, bridging vast distances with nothing more than his faith and his feet. In the end, it was this profound combination of faithfulness, ritual, and sheer presence that bound the messenger to the empire. He was a sacred thread in the vast, intricate tapestry of the Ashanti nation, a living link connecting the golden stool in Kumasi to every province, every village, and every heart that looked to the capital for guidance, protection, and identity. He was more than a messenger. He was the lifeblood of a kingdom. The Abrafo, the messengers of the Ashanti, carried so much more than words. They bore the very weight of a sentiment itself. Imagine this. A messenger is dispatched to the neighboring kingdom of Denkira, or to the lands of the Akiam or the Fant. Every single step they take, every gesture they make, every syllable they utter becomes a performance, a delicate, high-stakes performance of loyalty, wisdom, and profound restraint. To speak hastily, to misstep in ritual etiquette could unravel the most delicate alliances. It could tip the balance of power, or worse, invite the wrath of the ancestors. The pressure was immense. Long before they even set foot on the path, the Abrafo prepared in silence. This wasn't just a physical journey, it was a spiritual one. They would fast, meditate, and repeat sacred chants, calling upon the spirits to guide their hearts, sharpen their minds, and steady their tongues. The kingdom's elders would offer counsel, reminding them that diplomacy was an act of living ritual. It was an intricate dance between visible authority and the invisible obligations that held their world together. Let's just pause for a moment and picture this. The morning sun breaks through the mist over Kumasi. The distant, rhythmic hum of drums echoes the city's heartbeat. And a lone messenger, an Abrafo, steps onto the path that leads into unknown lands, carrying the destiny of a nation with him. The journey itself was a testament to endurance and diplomacy. Traversing rivers, dense forests, and rolling hills, the Abrafo carried symbolic tokens with them. These weren't just random items. They were folded cloths, golden trinkets, and small, intricately carved figurines, tangible reminders of Ashanti's presence and power. In the villages they passed along the way, the messenger moved with a quiet, powerful dignity. Every bow, every respectful word spoken to a local elder reinforced both the messenger's personal authority and the cohesion of the entire empire. It was a constant, moving display of respect and strength. Upon reaching a neighboring court, The arrival was a masterclass in observation and poise. The Abrafo would enter with measured, deliberate steps. He observed every rank, noting the subtle gestures of the elders, the exact positions of the chiefs, and the intricate, unspoken hierarchies of the palace. He had to read the room before a single official word was spoken, and before speaking, he performed small but crucial acts of ritual respect, touching the ground to honor the earth and the local spirits, adjusting his sash in a sign of humility, and whispering silent prayers to ensure the ancestors' guidance was with him in this critical moment. Negotiation in this context was nothing like what we imagine today. It wasn't a rapid-fire exchange of demands. It was a sacred practice, a matter of rhythm, patience, and deep insight. The messenger conveyed demands for tribute, requests for peace, or responses to prior communications, all while upholding the honor of a gentleman. Every phrase was chosen with care, every metaphor was laden with meaning, and every gesture carried weight. One wrong tone, one poorly chosen word, could inflame tensions or, in the worst-case scenario, dishonor the sacred golden stool itself, the very soul of the Ashanti nation. In some councils, the Abrafo would sit in complete silence for hours. His role was not to dominate the conversation, but to listen, to interpret the non-verbal cues, to sense the mood of the room, and to wait for the exact, perfect moment to speak. The trust placed in the messenger's discernment was absolute. The kings and chiefs of these neighboring territories knew that these envoys weren't just couriers carrying instructions. They were vessels carrying the very spirit of the empire. Let's pause again. Imagine the scene. A gentle breeze rustles the palm fronds just outside the palace walls. You can hear the soft calls of birds, and inside, the messenger breathes deeply, centering himself, preparing for the delicate, nerve-wracking balance of diplomacy that is about to unfold. The fate of thousands could rest on his next words. The role of the Abrafo was incredibly perilous. It wasn't just a long walk. Political tensions could be at a breaking point. Rival spies were everywhere, watching his every move, and allegiances could shift as suddenly as the weather. Each mission was a profound test of judgment, courage, and mental fortitude. Yet, their loyalty was unwavering. For a messenger, failure wasn't just a personal shame. It was a rupture in the sacred chain connecting the king, the empire, and the ancestors. It was an unthinkable betrayal, even when they were far from home, tempted, perhaps, by the comforts of a foreign court, or pressured to appease a powerful local chief. The Abrafo remained steadfast. Their integrity was their shield. Every step they took, every word they spoke, was an act of faith. It was a constant reaffirmation that the authority of the Golden Stool and the well-being of the entire Ashanti nation rested, quite literally, in their hands. Once the messages were delivered and the diplomatic dance was complete, the journey was only half over. The messenger had to retrace those same perilous paths, now carrying responses, new information, and fresh directives back to the Ashanti. He returned not as a mere courier who had simply dropped off a package, but as a living testament to the empire's reach, its diplomatic skill, and its disciplined spirit. Every village he passed through again, every forest clearing he navigated, and every river he crossed reaffirmed his sacred role as both a servant and a guardian of Ashantiman's honor. Let's take one last moment to visualize his return. The sun dips low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the path. The Abrafo is moving with a light but deliberate rhythm, almost a run, feeling the pulse of the empire within his own heartbeat, driving him homeward. Through these incredible journeys, the Abrafo embodied a profound principle that communication was sacred, that loyalty was paramount, and that every single word was a thread carefully woven into the magnificent, enduring tapestry of an empire. When an Abrafo stepped into a foreign court, they carried more than just the king's words. They carried the very essence of a gentleman. To enter another ruler's presence was to walk as the Ashanti himself, a living embodiment of his authority, his judgment, and his sacred lineage. Every glance, every bow, every measured breath became a mirror of the kingdom's honor. Imagine the pressure. It was immense. A single slipper word spoken too quickly, a gesture misread. A foot placed wrongly could ignite offense, sow distrust, or even provoke a devastating conflict. The messenger's mind and body were trained to maintain a careful, unshakable equilibrium, calm, alert, and entirely present in each fleeting moment. They were not just delivering a message. They were the message. Let's pause for a moment and picture this. The sun rests behind distant hills, casting long, dramatic shadows over a palace courtyard. Birds circle lazily in the cooling air. And there, the messenger stands poised, listening to the faint, unfamiliar murmur of foreign voices. He can feel the pulse of his own heartbeat, a steady drum echoing the rhythm of the empire he represents. In this stillness, he is a conduit, a connection between his home and this new, uncertain space. The Abrafo's attire was not mere clothing. It was a proclamation of rank and responsibility. Ceremonial sashes, intricately patterned cloths, and the subtle adornments of gold were not for show. They signaled their role as emissaries of both divine and temporal power. When seated in council, they were expected to mirror the dignity of their king, maintaining a posture of calm restraint while they skillfully interpreted the delicate, shifting moods of neighboring rulers. They were masters of observation, reading the room with an almost supernatural intuition. Every action was steeped in symbolism, touching the ground before speaking, adjusting the ceremonial cloth on their shoulder, or even pausing to take a deep, deliberate breath. These were not nervous tics. They were rituals designed to anchor the messenger in ancestral guidance and center their spirit. In these foreign lands, their body became a living vessel of the golden stool's presence, carrying the moral and spiritual weight of the entire Ashanti nation across miles of challenging terrain and through tense, unpredictable courts. They were the physical manifestation of a sacred, unifying symbol. Even with the utmost care and training, misunderstandings were an ever-present danger. An expression intended to show respect could be interpreted as disdain, threatening a fragile peace. A pause to carefully consider a response might be misread as hesitation or weakness, provoking suspicion. In these high-stakes moments, the messenger had to rely on a powerful combination of wisdom and spiritual attunement. Whispered prayers for guidance, subtle gestures to soothe tensions, and the careful calibration of their tone of voice became essential tools for preserving honor and averting conflict. Diplomacy was a delicate dance, and the Abrafo were its most skilled performers. They learned to move like water, flexible enough to adapt to any courtly nuance, yet unyielding in their core mission and faithful to the king's message. Their loyalty was absolute, but it was a loyalty tempered by the keen awareness that true diplomacy demanded far more than blind obedience. It required insight, intuition, and the profound courage to embody the very authority of the throne. They had to think on their feet, balancing the king's will with the immediate reality of the situation, knowing the fate of thousands could rest on their next word or gesture. Let's pause again. The afternoon sun warms a clay courtyard, and the distant, rhythmic hum of a drum signals the passing of time. The messenger's shadow stretches long and steady beside him, a quiet, unwavering testament to his devotion. He is a statue of patience, a silent observer whose very stillness communicates strength and purpose. He is a pillar of the kingdom, standing firm hundreds of miles from its center. The return journeys were no less demanding than the outward trek. The messenger now bore the weight of the outcome news of peace or simmering tension, tribute received or an alliance refused. In their mind, they carried a perfect reflection of the Asanahin's will as it had been received, and they were responsible for conveying that reception back to him without error. A successful mission reinforced the Golden Stool's authority and expanded its influence. A misstep, however, could be remembered for generations, a stain on the honor of the kingdom and the messenger himself. The Abrafo lived a sacred paradox. They were both intensely visible and completely invisible. They walked with the authority of the king, yet they were humble servants. They bore immense power, yet their own desires, their own ego, had to be completely suspended for the good of the mission. Every pulse, every breath, every step became a conscious offering of fidelity to the throne, to the people, and to the ancestors who guided their path and gave them strength. Their existence was an act of selfless service. Through all these trials, the messenger perfected the subtle art of presence. To be a living extension of the Golden Stool demanded a level of patience, humility, and unwavering devotion that is difficult for us to even comprehend today. The Abrafo became more than just a person. They became a bridge between kingdoms, a link between the temporal world of politics and the sacred realm of the ancestors. They were a silent, powerful force, ensuring that the heartbeat of Asantaman resonated far beyond the walls of Kumasi. Let's take another pause. The wind rustles through the palm fronds, a sound that has accompanied the messenger on so many journeys. The last light of day falls upon the distant hills, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. And through it all, the messenger remains steady, a quiet sentinel of honor, faithfulness, and duty. Their work is done for the day, but their commitment never ends. They are the living memory and the enduring spirit of their people. The forest paths that once echoed only with the careful steps of messengers now bore the footfalls of strangers, foreign officials, soldiers, and missionaries with eyes untrained in the subtleties of Ashanti power. To them, the swift-footed Abrafo were merely runners, servants, couriers of commands. Yet these men were, in truth, living embodiments of the Golden Stool, carriers of the kingdom's will, guardians of diplomacy, and witnesses to sacred law. Let's pause for a moment. Imagine the scene. The midday sun filters through the tropical canopy, illuminating the polished brass of foreign instruments and the embroidered cloths of officials. These stark, unfamiliar sights stand out against the rich, earthen tones of the mud-walled palaces of Kumasi. The messengers move like shadows, weaving between these newcomers, their eyes alert, their silence measured, their bodies honed to transmit authority without a single word misplaced. The British and European missionaries saw only what their worldview allowed them to see. Figures who could be ordered about, who could deliver words without understanding the intricate dance of court protocol. Spiritual allegiance and ancestral oversight. They saw messengers, but they missed the message. They failed to recognize that a single miscommunicated phrase, a gesture misinterpreted, could shift allegiances, provoke tension, or obscure sacred truths. Every step taken by the Abrafo in the presence of these strangers was both a literal journey and a spiritual act. It was a constant negotiation of perception, a subtle dance to ensure that the essence of Asantaman's sovereignty remained intact, even when it was invisible to the colonizers. The messengers' lessons in restraint, patience, and alertness were now tested as never before. With every bow, with every carefully chosen utterance, they guarded the dignity of the Ashanti court. even as outsiders treated their sacred service with casual and often condescending ignorance. They were masters of a quiet resistance, using the very tools of servitude to assert their kingdom's enduring power. They carried more than just scrolls. They carried the weight of their people's honor. But the challenges ran deeper than mere misunderstandings of rank. The Abrafo faced profound moral dilemmas that tested the very core of their being. The letters they were tasked to carry to European authorities often contained more than met the eye. Within the script were encoded warnings, subtle counsel, or ritual instructions meant to maintain peace or signal loyalty. These messages were crafted with immense care, designed to be understood by those attuned to the Ashanti way of thinking. When these were misread, dismissed as primitive superstition, or simply ignored, the consequences were dire. The misinterpretations threatened not only political stability, but also the spiritual balance that the Ashanti believed underpinned the health of their entire kingdom. The messengers, therefore, became interpreters of dual worlds. They had to navigate a reality shaped by ancestral law and the divine will of the king, while simultaneously dealing with a foreign logic obsessed with bureaucracy, rigid hierarchies, and written documentation. Each encounter demanded an almost impossible calibration of tone, posture, and timing. It was a silent, constant assertion that the Ashanti court remained sovereign, even under the scrutinizing gaze of imperial eyes. They had to appear compliant while being defiant, servile while being sovereign. Let us pause again. Imagine a gentle breeze carrying the scent of smoke from cooking fires, mingling with the faint laughter of village children. Now, listen for the measured, rhythmic cadence of a messenger's footsteps on the well-worn earth. That sound is a reminder that these pathways have always been sacred, long before foreign boots marched upon them. It's a sound of continuity, of a tradition that bends but does not break. The Abrafo were not just delivering messages, they were performing sovereignty. Their very presence in the colonial administrative offices or marketplaces was a political act. While a British officer might see only a courier waiting for a reply, an Ashanti onlooker would see something entirely different. They would see a representative of the Ashanti, a man whose sash was trimmed with gold, not for decoration, but as a symbol of the wealth and power of their kingdom. They would see a man whose dignified posture spoke of a deep, unshakable loyalty to a power far older and more profound than the temporary authority of the colonizers. This is why their role was so critical. In a world where their political autonomy was being systematically dismantled, the Abrafo became a living repository of Ashanti identity. Even as foreign powers attempted to categorize, simplify, and ultimately control them, the messengers preserved their ancient rituals and codes. Secret gestures exchanged in a crowded market, hidden signs embedded in the way a message was folded, and the profound discipline of silence. All of these ensured that sacred knowledge was never diluted or stolen. Each successful journey, each message delivered and understood by its intended Ashanti recipient, reinforced the invisible threads of loyalty connecting the king, his messengers, and the ancestral guardians of the realm. The Ashanti envoys' vigilance preserved a delicate, almost impossible balance. They had to master the art of appearing to serve under foreign scrutiny while remaining entirely and unshakably true to the kingdom's sacred orders. It was a breathtaking mastery of political theater, spiritual awareness, and incredible bodily discipline, all woven together with a quiet, steely courage. Think of them crossing a river in the late afternoon, the sealed message held high, their movements deliberate and graceful. In the distance, colonial officers might watch, seeing only a man doing a job. But the messenger knows the truth. The long shadows of the palms stretching across the water are witnesses. The river itself, ancient and alive, is a witness. They are not just crossing water, they are carrying the spirit of their nation, persevering against a rising tide. To the Abrafo, every misperception by outsiders was a double-edged sword. It was a threat, certainly a threat to Ashanti authority and to their very way of life. But it was also an opportunity. It was an opportunity to teach, not with words, but with actions. An opportunity to demonstrate restraint in the face of arrogance, humility in the face of power, and the art of a subtle, deep-rooted resistance. By remaining unbroken, calm, and resolute, the messengers demonstrated a fundamental truth that the Europeans could never grasp. The power of the golden stool transcended foreign eyes. It proved that true authority is not only visible, loud, and domineering. It is also found in ritual, in ancestral guidance, and in disciplined, unwavering service. Their quiet dignity was their loudest proclamation of freedom. As evening approaches, the forest begins to hum with the sounds of the night. Fireflies flicker like wandering stars above the mud walls of the compounds. Imagine a messenger, his journey for the day complete, pausing on the path. He is not just resting his body, he is taking a moment to honor the path that supported him, the king he serves, and the ancestors who guide him. In that silent, solitary moment, we are reminded of the ultimate lesson of the Abrafo, that service, when performed with honor and purpose, is both a heavy burden and the highest privilege. It is the thread that holds a kingdom, a culture, and a people together, even in the darkest of times. As the sun sets over the Ashanti capital, its golden light casts long, deep shadows across the red clay paths. Imagine these very paths, centuries ago, thrumming with the energy of swift-footed messengers, the Abrafo running with unbroken words, their bodies and minds dedicated to the king's will. But a new era dawned, one of colonial proclamations that sought to reshape this world. Foreign administrators, officials, and missionaries arrived, determined to catalogue, rewrite, and simplify a complex, ancient system they could never truly comprehend. In this new order, the Abrafo, those vital guardians of the king's authority, found themselves diminished in the public eye, but their spirit, their essence, was far from broken. Let's just pause here for a moment. Close your eyes and listen. Can you hear it? The evening wind carries whispers of old codes, the faint, persistent murmur of drum rhythms that still echo from the heart of the forest. You can almost feel the quiet, deliberate steps of messengers who, even now, move unseen, their purpose unwavering, to preserve the sanctity of their sacred service. The enforced structures of colonial rule were a shock to the system, disrupting the delicate balance of the Ashanti hierarchy. The Abrafo, once central figures in diplomacy, in war, and in sacred rituals, were suddenly relegated to what the strangers considered menial tasks. Their public recognition, the honor they once commanded, began to fade into obscurity. The immense weight of their knowledge, the intricate web of codes, languages, and protocols they held, became invisible to those who had no framework to understand its profound depth. To the colonial eye, they were simply servants, their true function completely missed. And yet, the messengers themselves did not vanish. They didn't simply disappear. Instead, they adapted. They walked the hidden paths of secrecy. They continued to carry vital oral messages between loyal chiefs and villagers, their words weaving a network of communication right under the noses of the new rulers. They performed their silent rituals away from prying eyes, reciting the ancestral chants that had guided generations of their predecessors. In this new reality, every whispered oath, every hidden gesture, Every memorized verse became a powerful act of quiet resistance. It was a defiant assertion that Ashanti governance, their deep-seated loyalty, and their rich spirituality could not be erased, could not be undone by the dismissive gaze of colonial eyes. Their work continued, not in the open courts, but in the shadows, fueled by a commitment that burned brighter than ever. Even as their official duties were stripped away, the messenger's most sacred role endured. They remained teachers, transmitters of a living tradition. They became the guardians of memory. Imagine small village courtyards, under the protective cloak of night. The air is cool, the only light coming from a flickering fire. Here, the elder Abrafo would gather the young apprentices. They would retell the ancient protocols, the intricate codes of conduct, and the sacred practices that defined their calling. Through painstaking oral recitation, they preserved not just the content of messages, but the very rhythm, the discipline, and the philosophy of their vocation. The cadence of their voices, the precision of their gestures, the deep focus in their eyes, it was all part of the lesson. These hidden practices, these clandestine schools of knowledge, ensured that the spirit of the Abrafo survived. It was kept alive, a flame carefully shielded from the winds of change, waiting for a time when Ashanti traditions could be reclaimed and celebrated in the open once more. The messengers themselves became living archives. Each one was a library of ancestral wisdom, embodying the core tenets of loyalty, knowledge, and sacred service, even as the colonial administration tried to simplify or dismiss them as relics of a bygone era. They were the bridge, the human connection to a past that refused to die. Let's pause again. Picture the scene. Fires crackle in small, secluded villages across the kingdom. The elders' voices, weathered but strong, mingle with the chirping of nocturnal birds and the hum of insects. They are transmitting lessons, codes, and ancestral reminders to the eager young minds who will carry this legacy forward. This is not just storytelling. This is the lifeblood of a culture being passed from one generation to the next, a sacred trust whispered in the darkness. It is an act of profound hope and unbreakable continuity. The art of this hidden resistance was subtle and masterfully executed. Secret messages, critical to the survival of the Ashanti leadership, were constantly on the move. They were carried between trusted hands, ingeniously disguised as simple errands, market day shopping lists, or innocent personal letters. This clandestine network ensured that the Ashanti king's commands, the vital protocols of diplomacy, and the unified spirit of the people endured. Despite active suppression from the colonial government, the messenger's ability to navigate these two parallel realities, public invisibility on one hand and private, vigilant duty on the other, demonstrates a profound mastery of patience, humility, and incredible courage. Think about the mental fortitude required for this. Even the smallest action had to be deliberate and meaningful. A specific gesture exchanged in a crowded marketplace, a carefully folded note passed in a shadowed alleyway, or even a calculated pause in a seemingly casual conversation. All of these could be signals maintaining the invisible threads of loyalty that held the empire together. The Abrafo's resistance was never loud or openly defiant. That would have been foolish and short-lived. Instead, it was disciplined, deliberate, and deeply faithful. Each secret journey, each unrecorded oath taken in confidence, each silent ritual performed away from view, became another link in an unbroken chain, connecting the past, the present, and the future of the Ashanti people. To witness the Abrafo in these hidden acts, even in our imagination, is to see a form of devotion that transcends any need for public recognition. It is courage that seeks no accolades, no medals, no monuments, The fading of their public acknowledgement, the loss of their formal status, could not dim the sacred rhythm of their duty. It was a rhythm that beat in their hearts, a calling they answered without hesitation. Through these secret practices, these quiet acts of defiance, the messengers ensured that the core of Ashanti sovereignty, their ritual order, and their spiritual authority persisted. Safe and untouchable, beyond the reach of colonial misunderstanding and control, they kept the soul of their nation alive. Let's take one final moment to reflect. The night deepens over Kumasi. The stars in the vast African sky glimmer like the watchful eyes of the ancestors. They look down upon those who preserve the ancient knowledge, reminding us that true service, true honor, is not measured by visibility or public praise. It is measured by faithfulness, by dedication, and by the quiet, unyielding endurance of the human spirit against all odds. The legacy of the Abrafo teaches us that what is essential is often invisible, and that the most powerful currents are the ones that run deepest. The first light of dawn spills over Kumasi's red rooftops, brushing the streets where the footsteps of the Abrafo once resonated like drumbeats across the empire. Though centuries have passed, the essence of their service remains woven into the fabric of Ashanti life. A quiet but unbroken current connecting past to present. Let us pause for a moment. The morning air carries the scent of incense and kola nuts, offerings laid for ancestors who once bore royal words across forests and rivers, whose discipline and loyalty guided kings and commoners alike. In modern Ghana, the spirit of the Abrafo lives on, most vividly in the sacred cadence of chieftaincy rituals. Consider the Aquaseed Festival, a magnificent celebration of Ashanti heritage. Here, envoys still move with deliberate, measured steps, bearing messages and gifts from subjects to the Asanahin, the king. Every bow, every ceremonial exchange of words, every beat of the phantom from drums resonates with a long lineage of messengers. These were men who understood that true honor was found in action, not in recognition. They were the vital channels of communication, the lifeblood of a kingdom, and their legacy is performed and relived with every festival. The stories of these past messengers are not confined to history books. They are living lessons passed down from elders to children around evening fires. They recount tales of incredible endurance, of runners who traversed dense forests and crossed swift rivers, their bodies pushed to the limit, all to deliver a single, vital message. They speak of courage, of messengers who faced danger from rival clans or wild animals, yet never faltered, and they teach humility, reminding the young ones that the most important duties are often performed without fanfare or applause. These narratives are more than just entertainment, they are a form of living instruction, shaping the moral compass of the next generation, reminding all who listen that duty, even when unseen, is what truly sustains kingdoms. The children watch, their eyes wide, absorbing the values that have held their culture together for centuries. The principles once held sacred by the Abrafo have not faded with time. They endure within the very heart of Ashanti protocol and modern governance. Inside the Manhia Palace, the seat of the Asanahin, the etiquette of the court is a direct reflection of the messenger's code. The recognition of hierarchy, the careful phrasing of requests, and the discreet handling of sensitive information, all these practices are taught and upheld. Echoing the discipline of the Abrafo, the messengers of old, with their unwavering fidelity, inspire modern officials and diplomats. They serve as a powerful reminder to embody restraint, to pay meticulous attention to detail, and to remain steadfastly loyal in the transmission of important words. Their memory is not merely ceremonial, it actively shapes the function of governance today. just as the Abrafo ensured that no word of the king was ever lost, twisted, or distorted. Contemporary leaders are reminded that clarity, respect, and accountability in communication are the fundamental pillars of a stable and just society. When a message is delivered with integrity, trust is built. When communication is clear, confusion is avoided. The Abrafo understood this instinctively, and their legacy continues to guide the Ashanti people toward order and harmony. Let us pause again. Listen. The wind rustles through the palm fronds just outside the palace walls. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the echoes of past runners, a whisper of the discipline and courage that forged an empire. A timeless reminder of the power of a message faithfully delivered. Beyond the formal settings of palaces and festivals, the memory of the messengers thrives in the rich soil of cultural storytelling, in vibrant community plays, and in poetic oral recitations. You can see young performers in village courtyards, their bodies moving with energy and grace as they reenact the legendary journeys of the Abrafo. They tell stories of the long, grueling runs, the secret coded messages tapped out on drums that could travel for miles, and the tense diplomatic encounters where a single wrong word could mean the difference between peace and war. These performances do more than just entertain. They are a living archive, reminding entire communities that honor is a quality cultivated through fidelity, patience, and profound respect for the words we carry. Museums and heritage sites also play a crucial role in preserving this legacy. They house precious artifacts, intricately carved ceremonial staffs, faded letters bearing royal seals, and sacred symbols that were once entrusted to the messengers. These are not just objects. They are tangible connections to the spirit of those who moved, often unseen, yet undeniably shaped the course of history. To hold one of these staffs is to feel the weight of the responsibility it once represented. The legacy of the Abrafo is also a moral one. They teach a timeless lesson about the delicate balance between visibility and discretion. They show us the difference between reckless speed and careful haste. And most importantly, they exemplify the harmony between unwavering duty and genuine humility. In a world that often prizes loudness and demands constant attention, the Abrafo remind us that true influence does not need to clamor for the spotlight. It moves quietly, purposefully, shaping outcomes not through noise, but through integrity, devotion, and a commitment to serving the greater good. To trace the footsteps of the Abrafo across the landscape of time is to witness the remarkable persistence of honor, though the colonial gaze often misunderstood or dismissed their vital roles. And though the relentless pressures of history threatened to erase their memory, these messengers have endured. They live on in memory, in sacred ritual, and in daily practice. They are the silent, steady heartbeat of Ashanti continuity, their profound lessons echoing in every respectful gesture, every disciplined envoy, and every story told beneath the vast African sky. Let us pause one last time. The sun now rises fully over Kumasi, casting long, golden shafts of light across the bustling city. It illuminates the ancient and the new, reminding us that the path of service, though often unseen and uncelebrated, leaves the most lasting and beautiful traces upon the land and its people. The legacy of the Abrafo is not a relic of the past. It is a living, breathing guide for the future. As twilight drapes its soft mantle over Kumasi, the hard edges of palaces, streets, and forest paths begin to blur. These were the very paths once trodden by the Abrafo, the king's envoys. In these quiet, contemplative hours, we can almost see them. Imagine a messenger, his feet dusted with the iconic red clay of the earth, his heart steady, his eyes alert. He pauses just for a moment to listen to the whispering wind as it carries the stories of his ancestors through the trees. Every breath he took was a vow of loyalty. Every measured step a testament to his unwavering faithfulness. Let's pause here together. Imagine a fire crackling gently as the cool night breathes around us. In its flickering warmth, we can almost feel the rhythm of a messenger's life. A constant cycle of running, listening, observing, and speaking only when summoned by duty. Their journeys were never just physical treks from one point to another. They were deeply spiritual, moral, and communal voyages. Each errand was a vital bridge, connecting the king to his people, the realm to its sacred rituals, and the past to the future. To serve as an Abrafo was to live a life of complete devotion. It meant carrying so much more than mere words. They bore the very essence of the king's will, the vibrant pulse of an entire empire, and the immense weight of its most sacred secrets. A single misstep, a moment of carelessness, could send ripples of consequence through villages and courts alike, altering destinies as profoundly as any great battle. Yet, with each step, they carried a quiet confidence tempered by profound humility. They understood a fundamental truth. Loyalty is not measured in grand recognition or public praise, but in the silent, unwavering constancy of one's service. They ran through dense, rain-soaked forests, across sun-scorched fields, and over rivers that mirrored the sky above. In every encounter, their awareness was total. They noticed the faintest rustle of leaves, heard the distant whisper of drums on the wind, and saw the shadow of a distant patrol. Each moment demanded sharp discernment, immense courage, and a deep well of patience. These were virtues nurtured over years of rigorous training, passed down from elder messengers who knew that sometimes silence speaks far louder and more powerfully than any words. Even when they went unnoticed, their very movements were a form of prayer. Their disciplined silence was a vessel that preserved truth. The steady rhythm of their travel was a form of harmony with the land and the cosmos. Each run they undertook carried blessings for the villages they passed, divine protection for the kings they served, and a deep spiritual steadiness for themselves. Across the vast empire, their discipline shaped the fabric of society. Villagers came to trust the messengers' unshakable integrity. Kings depended on their precision for governance. And the collective memory of the Ashanti people knew that their strength rested as much on this fidelity, in motion as it did on the wisdom spoken in the king's council. Let's pause again. Feel the breeze as it brushes through a palace courtyard. It carries the sound of distant drums, echoing the measured pace of footfalls, long departed but never forgotten. This rhythm lingers in the air, a timeless reminder that true power is sustained not by loud proclamation alone, but by the invisible, tireless service that supports it from beneath. Though colonial observers often misunderstood them, and the relentless march of time threatened to erase their legacy, the spirit of the Abrafo endures. You can see it today in modern chieftaincy, in the vibrant pageantry of festivals, and in the rich oral histories that are still told. Their lessons of discretion, courage, and the sacred duty to uphold what one carries are woven into the cultural DNA. Every young envoy or cultural practitioner who meticulously honors protocol is, in their own way, carrying forward the rhythm first set by these ancient messengers. Their footsteps are more than just history. They are verses of obedience, a living poetry that continues to shape behavior, ethics, and community cohesion to this day. When a child sits at the feet of an elder, listening to these journeys being recounted, they are learning a lesson that transcends centuries. That service is both a profound responsibility and an incredible privilege. It is a lesson in loyalty that time cannot fade. Let's take one final pause. The moon rises fully over the palace now, and the shadows of the past mingle freely with the present. We are reminded that every word spoken, every message carried, and every single act of faithfulness leaves an indelible trace upon the earth, upon the heart, and in our collective memory. As we close this chapter beneath the vast, star-filled night sky, let's reflect on the quiet, understated heroism of the Abrafo. They were not celebrated for grandeur or for battlefield triumphs, but for their steadfastness, their discernment, and their deep reverence for their role. Their breath bore the king's will. Their steps safeguarded messages that held the power to unite or divide. Their silence carried the weight of kingdoms. In honoring them, we honor a timeless principle that duty and faith are inseparable, and that true leadership relies upon those who serve quietly and faithfully in the background. And by remembering them, we too become a part of this continuum of respect, obedience, and cultural wisdom. The night deepens, and the great baobab's shadows stretch across the earth, a silent witness to the lives of those who have passed, and to the powerful lessons they leave behind. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found meaning in this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more journeys into the heart of history. You are under baobab skies.